Hey, everybody. Another edition of the podcast here today. I think we can't really do one without talking about the coronavirus, COVID-19, and the impact it's having on everybody's lives and our different impressions on how people are reacting.
Hey everyone, welcome to XYZ Storytellers, a platform started by three people across generations X, Y, and Z engaging in conversations in the spirit of increased empathy and understanding.
Hi, I'm Erin, the millennial traveler and author. I'm an empath with a drive for connecting to others. I enjoy singing in the car, eating pints of ice cream, and hanging out with my cat, Gimbal.
Hey, I'm Rich, the gray-beard Gen Xer with 30 years in conference rooms or airplanes around the globe. I've also been a Little League coach and a family bus driver. This podcast is a way for me to have the types of conversations that just don't happen enough in my day-to-day life.
And me, I'm Lily. I've always been very opinionated and I speak passionately about things no matter who I might be with at the time. I'm here to share my thoughts and get the perspectives of two other generations so I can grow and expand my understanding of the world around me.
With XYZ Storytellers, our conversations aren't meant to be political, social, or even related to current events. We are just recording authentic conversations on a variety of topics, hoping they will resonate in some small way. Thanks for listening.
Lily, why don't we start with you? How are your friends and classmates and everybody else viewing this? I mean, it's a once-in-a-lifetime event for me, and I'm 53, but it's obviously a once-in-a-lifetime event for you.
Yeah, it hasn't really hit me yet, like how serious it is, because last week at school, like it wasn't a joke, like no one was joking about it, but it wasn't as as serious as everyone was making it out to be, so we all kind of just like weren't really worried about it. And then people started getting like their spring break extended, and like places started shutting down and we can't go out anymore, like there's like about to be a curfew or something. So I think we're all in kind of like a shock that it's actually happening. Like I think it's more like the fact that we haven't really accepted it yet because it doesn't feel real, but it's pretty scary right now.
Well, I guess until you have people that are close to you that are in the hospital or are suffering with it, right? And that's the craziest part is they don't have any idea who doesn't have symptoms but is still transmitting it. I mean, we could all be transmitting it to each other in the house here and not know it.
Mm-hmm. I think that's definitely the scarier part for me is the fact that I am blessed to be young and healthy, but that also means that I could carry it and not show any symptoms. I could have it, I could contract it and heal from it quite quickly, but not realize that I'm dealing with COVID-19 until it's too late and I've already infected other people. So I do think that there's, especially on social media, you're seeing two different reactions to this. One is what some people are calling an overreaction, where it's total social isolation, they're self-quarantining, whether or not they think they have symptoms. And then there are people who are like, look, this is just another strand of the cold. You're fine. Just wash your hands. Go about your daily life. And I kind of went back and forth for a while in the beginning because I didn't want to be that person that was overreacting, but I also didn't want to be underreacting and accidentally make someone sick. And now I'm certainly more towards I'm going to be as cautious as I possibly can because I don't want to put myself or anyone else in a compromised position unknowingly. But for at least a week or so there, I definitely was kind of bouncing back and forth of not really knowing what source to trust. And I think that's the hardest part, is not knowing who has the accurate information and then not being able to form your own opinion about it.
Yeah, I think for me, setting aside the U.S. situation right now, I look at countries like Iran, Italy, China, South Korea, and the well-documented way that those played out. They all played out slightly differently, right? But especially in Italy, it really hit home for me. I was just talking to Lily about this earlier, where everyone I think has heard by now the term flattening the curve, which for those that haven't, it basically social distancing and other aspects of preventative action slows the onset of the virus. And it doesn't potentially doesn't reduce the number of cases that will be transmitted, but it does slow it down and spreads it out over time, which makes this thing a multi-month exercise, not a multi-week exercise. And the challenge with Italy, they've written up medical guidance that has been signed by I think, or it's pending a signature by their governing medical board or whatever it is, and says if patients over 80 have a certain comorbidity score of 5 or higher, and I guess if you think about diabetes is 1 point, hypertension is 2 points. I mean, whatever it is, they've got some kind of scoring mechanism, and the higher the number, the more at risk you are. And they have already outstripped their capacity for ICU and respirators. And so some of these doctors are having to go through this scoring exercise and say, I'm sorry, I can't put this patient into an ICU and on a respirator because they're not likely to survive. And we need that respirator to help someone who has a better chance of recovering. And to me, that's when it kind of hit. And then another article, you see these doctors that are in their mid-30s or 40s, which is younger than me, so their risk should be lower, and they're catching it, and some of them are getting very, very sick and recovering. Others are getting very sick and actually dying at 38, 39. I mean, there's a false sense of security, I think, in the 20s to 30s that really concerns me, because it does make you a little bit more cavalier and lean towards that. Well, I'm even if I got it, I'm not going to get really sick. But that doesn't mean you can't carry it, right?
Well, and I think that was, I would agree with you, Rich, that's where it really sank in for me, was when I was reading about Italy and them having to make decisions about who to prioritize, because, I do have grandparents. I have a great grandmother who's 98. And I could not imagine us getting to the point where they have her admitted or they won't admit her because she's unlikely to survive it. And that when a society gets to that point, that is truly terrifying. And so I don't think I was really worried until Italy started sharing these realities. But to the other side of it, I actually ended up having to just step away from Facebook because I was getting so weighed down by the overload of information, and I was getting physically agitated by the fact that there were all these 20 and 30-year-olds posting online, oh, everyone else is dealing with COVID-19 and I just found a super cheap flight to South America. And it's like the insensitivity to the immunocompromised, or that's the phrase that they're using, right? Immunocompromised, mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm. The fact that there's so much of an insensitivity to the reality that some people are facing and the high level risk that a majority of our society is, it was making me way too angry to function on a day-to-day basis. And myself included. I mean, if I want to go see my grandparent, which now I can't because they've entirely closed down visitors and they're not allowed to leave at the retirement communities. But, if I did have to go see him or take him medication or something, and you exposed me unknowingly because you decided to go to the grocery store even though you're sick, you're just not thinking about the fact that other people have to continue going about their daily lives and interact with high-risk individuals.
Lily, how about you?
I don't really look at like all of the news because it's not what I see on my feed. It's more, people post about it and I read about it, but I don't like go looking for the information. So when I see something new, I'm always like shocked, and because they're talking about like all the deaths in Italy, how they like tripled overnight, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I didn't know it was that serious until like last night or like a day ago. And I really wasn't, like I was taking it seriously and I was washing my hands and I was being careful, but I didn't go to the extent that some people are going to. But now that I'm hearing about all of like the deaths and people like being like, what's that word where you have you don't have symptoms?
Asymptomatic.
Yeah, like they're just walking around with it and they don't even know, and like infecting all these random people because they don't even know that they have it. Like that's just so terrifying to me that I could have it right now and I wouldn't even know.
Right.
Like,
What do you guys think about, like, what's your reaction to those who are saying that this is just a media created virus and that
I don't know how you can say that. I don't know how you can say that anymore without appearing to be delusional. You know, I mean, let's be honest. Even Trump has changed his tenor from day to day, right? You know, and I posted on my Facebook feed a list of quotes from January all the way through till now. But what I read today, you know, he's saying, okay, you know, they're advising at a federal level to ban gatherings over 10 people. You know, close all restaurants and bars except for takeout. I mean, so he's at least finally converging with what his experts have been saying. So whatever delusion or whatever need he had to blame somebody else or not take responsibility, I think has kind of leveled off, and now he's realizing, okay, this is bigger. But it's just, there's been a couple of examples, and I'll just throw them out there. And there's a like a club sport wrestling at the college level, so it's not governed by the NCAA. And they had a tournament this past weekend with over 600 wrestlers, and the executive director did not shut it down. And when I asked about it, he said, well, I think there's a lot of stuff here that's being governed by fear, and I don't think that we should be governing our lives by fear. I think we should be governing our lives by faith. Which just, you know, same people that say thoughts and prayers when there's a mass shooting, right? It's like religion has got nothing to do with this. You know, your creator has nothing to do with this. Feeling like you're a chosen one or you're one of the favored children or whatever. It's absolutely irresponsible and incomprehensible that somebody actually thinks that way. But at the same time, it doesn't surprise me entirely. There were some scenes on Saturday night in Nashville. So in certain cities, they were shutting down the downtown. Nashville was there were people that were intentionally showing videos of crammed bars and honky tonks playing music and saying, what virus? We're all fine. And they all just scoffed at it. And, you know, I'm going to make note of those things, and then let's see where Nashville is in a month relative to the number of people that have the virus. Let's see if anybody ever finds out how many people came, you know, were from this event, this wrestling event this weekend, right? But to your point, Aaron, I think about stressing out. All you can control is what you can control. Right? So if you're not part of the problem, by definition, in this case, you're part of the solution. And you just hope that the 5% or whatever it is that defy comprehension don't do any more damage than you know, and that the 95% that finally get it, you know, actually can overcome that, because, you know, it's all about a curve, right? There's people on either ends of the extreme, and so you're never going to be idiot proof. You know?
Why do you guys think that people respond by saying, oh, this is just, you know, screw coronavirus, we're going to go party? Why do you think people respond to this way? Lily, I don't know if you've seen that in your school.
I think it's just the fact that, not that they don't want to accept it, because I don't think they're like in denial. I think they just don't want to be part of like the crowd that they think is overreacting. Like they don't want to be a part of the people that they think are being too cautious. So they just go to the extreme of being not cautious at all. So they can either look cool, which I don't understand, or they're just trying to like be like shocking, and they're trying to like
just to be contrary, just for the sake of being contrary.
I think it's just for the reactions of people that are actually like serious about it, and So they post these things and they're like, oh, got a $50 flight to like LA, like see you soon. And then people are like, that's so like inconsiderate, like go home, like y'all are so unsafe. And then I think they do it for that reaction because they like making people mad and they like being on the opposite side of things.
Well, and to a certain extent, though, for as long as there's $50 flights to LA, people are going to take them, right? So until they shut down the airlines, I mean, you know, yeah, I'm not advocating it. I'm just saying, right? If it's for sale and it's going to fly there, you know, I get it to a very, very small extent.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's people that just like to be contrary. But the thing that's crazy about this, there's been, you know, some really interesting memes that come across, and one of them said, if at the end of all this we thought we overreacted, that's the point. And if we didn't react well enough, we will absolutely know that we failed. Right? Because if we overreacted, this thing's going to get managed and we're going to get through it, and we're not going to outstrip our capacity. The crazy thing is from a per capita perspective, I don't think we have as much respirators and ICUs per person or per capita in this country as some of the other countries have. I think we have a really relatively small number of respirators, and we don't have enough hospital beds because a lot of hospitals got shut down because they started running them as for profits. You know, so the idea of having 10 nurses managing a floor and 3 of them are standing around or sitting in a break room and 7 of them are covering 5 patients each. Now you got 6 that are covering 12 patients each, and nobody's in the break room and they're all working their butts off, right? So any slack in the system has been stripped out in the name of capitalism.
So let's talk about that overreaction portion of it. You know, if we overreacted, we'll, you know, we might never know how much we overreacted. Have you guys stocked up on toilet paper?
I've bought it twice in the last 2 weeks. So I've got 2 packages of 10 rolls each or something like that.
Now, granted, you have a household of how many currently living there? 5. So that I mean, that makes a bigger difference because you're probably buying toilet paper more frequently anyway. But in speaking to these people who are going and filling carts and just stacking up, you know, mega rolls from Costco, that is too much of an overreaction in my mind. And the primary reason is, and I've appreciated the people who've been posting online saying, you know, when you hoard supplies, you are taking away supplies from other people and thereby making the community less safe. If you're preventing other people from practicing good hygiene by stocking up on hand sanitizer that you're not going to use in a month, you're actually making the problem worse. And it stresses me out to go into grocery stores and see all these shelves barren. Not only because it starts, you know, my mind thinking, okay, well, should I stock up on that one thing? Why is this a hot ticket item? And then I think about all of the store employees who are having to manage this chaos and the fact that they're getting very little gratitude from the people who are rushing in, filling their carts and ditching out and then complaining about the lines. But I'm also, you know, inspired to think about what the impact is, the long-term impact on how hoarding supplies is going to affect the rest of the community and all of these people who have just decided to stockpile themselves for months. There's overreacting, and then there's overreacting to the point where it's doing more damage to the rest of your community. And I just can't get past that.
Yeah, this is going to have an impact on our lives well after it's all said and done, right? The way that we view the community, the way we view our part in it, our place in it, and everything. I mean, there's some people out there, they do, it's called RA, they're retail arbitrage, where they go and buy up popular goods and then they put them on Amazon or eBay where they sell for a premium. It's a very legitimate business in general sense, but when you're dealing with collectibles like, you know, Pokemon cards or you know, baseball card, you know, or books, rare books, fine. You know what? If someone wants to collect that as a hobby, and if you buy it for $10 and somebody online wants to buy it for 30, more power to you. But there were a couple of people that went out and bought, I think there's one article online about a guy who bought 17,000 containers of hand sanitizer, and he was buying them for whatever they sold for. I don't even know what they sold for, but he was selling them for $70 each until Amazon and eBay shut him down, and now he has like 18,000 in his garage. They had another group of guys that did the same thing, and the Attorney General went and just seized everything out of their storage locker, and they're going to probably get indicted for price gouging. I think this guy that had him in his garage and was shut down by Amazon before he could really do much, I don't know if he's going to have criminal charges, but in the meantime, he's donated all of them to some charity, right? So he, he's clearly seen that, it was funny. I couldn't believe he actually talked to a reporter and had the article written up and was looking for sympathy at how much money he spent, and now he was stuck with all this stuff and nowhere to sell it. And he just thought he was doing a service by making it available virtually to people. And he didn't see anything wrong with it. And it just, the same people that are contrary for the sake of being contrary, there's some people that don't get it. This guy genuinely didn't realize, because he's actually made a living. He makes 6 figures a year doing retail arbitrage. Selling things online at a price higher than what he finds them when they're on sale somewhere else. And he does that 24/7, right? So he got caught up into that mindset, and he just didn't really take a step back and look at the social aspects of it.
I mean, I can understand if he was selling them for, $20, but 70, I mean, that's got to be a huge difference from when he purchased them. And then at that point, that's not, yeah, my mind is blown on how he didn't realize that was an inappropriate.
Well, in Amazon, they didn't necessarily zero in on him. They just banned like all the products that were coming up, like toilet paper, hand sanitizer, Lysol wipes, but even stuff like baby formula and diapers. There's people that are buying things up like crazy, and there's these poor moms that are out there. They can't find formula for their babies. They can't find diapers that fit because some mom went in ahead of them and bought, 6 cases of the stuff. Nobody ever said that production of diapers was going to shut down, right? It's not like a snowstorm where you're going to get locked down and none of the trucks can make deliveries. The trucks can make deliveries, and they'll make ways to get things to the store. But, some of these moms are freaking out. It's just a really interesting time.
Lily, why do you think people feel the impulse to stock up on things like toilet paper and hand sanitizer to an excessive amount?
I don't know, because
where do you think the influence is? The influence online? Is it walking into the stores and seeing empty shelves? Like, where does the thought come from?
I really think it's just like the panic. Like, I don't think it's online, because a lot of people online are like making fun of them. Like, they're like, oh, like, what are you going to do? Like, you have toilet paper and now you're immune to the coronavirus. Like, they're all like, the memes online are all making fun of the people like stocking up on toilet paper and like hand towels and stuff. I think it's just when you walk into a store and you see people stocking up, you're like, oh, should I be doing that? Like, do I have to go buy all this toilet paper and hand sanitizer and paper towels to be like ready for this? Like, I think it's just the whole like group mentality. Like, they're just like, they're freaking out that they don't want to be left out. They don't want to be the ones unprepared. So they're just being safe, what they think is safe.
Well, and it's the bread aisle in the blizzard, right? I mean, anytime there's a big storm, the bread aisle just goes completely empty. And there's an element of watching those shelves go down. You're like, maybe these people know something I don't know, but I don't want to, be out because I didn't step up. But the funniest thing, to make it a little bit more humorous, there's people out there that are buying things that they haven't bought in 10 years because they see that the shelves are almost gone. Like somebody said, I haven't bought cream cheese in 10 years, and I got myself 2 packages of cream cheese because it was running so low on the shelf. I mean, I don't know what some of the other food examples were, but you know?
Well, I mean, my mom and I went to Trader Joe's today. Well, do you guys have Trader Joe's?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Love that place. It's fantastic. But we went into Trader Joe's and she was picking up sweet potatoes. And I was like, gosh, every time I buy sweet potatoes, they end up getting moldy because I just forget about them and I don't use them and I don't cook. But then, I was standing there thinking about it and I was like, but I do have all of this extra time on my hands because I can't really go anywhere. I'm not hanging out with people. So what used to be the fact that I just didn't use supplies because I didn't have the time to cook or I didn't have the interest in making something. Now I have all this free time, well, theoretically, that would have otherwise been occupied by errands and social hours and stuff, that I have the time to cook. So at that point, I think that makes a little bit more sense if you think about the fact that now you're at home all the time, so you might have more time to cook. But
Yeah.
otherwise, I mean, you're right. There are people buying things that make no sense. I mean, I walked past the baking aisle and they were out of flour and oil. I think there was one container of oil left, and I wanted to buy it impulsively, even though I have no reason to buy oil. I have some here. I have no reason to buy oil, but I did. I felt like I had to get that last one because what if they knew something I didn't? I think that was a great way of putting it is, what if everyone else knows something I don't?
FOMO.
Mm-hmm.
But,
I really think it's
I will
also,
say, go ahead, Lily.
sorry, I just think it's also because like we have a lot of faith in strangers. So when we see people stocking up like that, like we're like, oh, they wouldn't be doing that for no reason. Like we don't just assume that they're just like weird and just stocking up. So we're like, okay, if they're doing that, like it's obviously for a reason. And you see all these other people doing it. And it is like FOMO, but you also at the same time, like you just like trust random people to like influence you. And you're like, oh, okay, sounds reasonable.
Well,
Said
it's like
the,
when one
said the
person's
lemming
looking
in the back of the crowd on the way to the cliff.
Yeah.
well, it's like when one person's looking at the sky and then everyone else looks at the sky. It's like, what are they looking at?
Mm-hmm.
They must know
Yeah.
something I don't.
Yeah. I will say though, in the last 3 years, our dynamic has shifted. We eat out far more than we ever ate out before, right? And so it almost seems like, I don't know, if I broke it into quarters, let's say we used to eat out a quarter of the time. Now we eat out a half of the time. And the other quarter of the meals I have are leftovers from the restaurants that I went out to eat at, right? And the last quarter is the stuff, well, let's even break that in half. Part of that is going to be what I actually bought and made, and then still managed to somehow have everything go rotten in the refrigerator. And the other half of that last quarter is I'm having breakfast cereal for dinner. I mean, so the idea of having a stocked pantry, so let's not underestimate the fact that a lot of people that were going into grocery stores had not really been into a grocery store and done really a true, oh my gosh, what if I can't go out and I have to eat 3 meals a day that I have to cook for myself? And so, not only do people, to your point, Lily, not only do you, and yours, Aaron, about, well, everyone's getting oil. I must need oil in my pantry. I know I don't have it. I've never used it, but I must need it for something. I guess I'll figure that out after the fact, right? But also because, I mean, I went out and I bought probably, I don't know, about a dozen cans of canned vegetables because I wasn't too keen on getting the fresh vegetables that everybody was breathing on. No matter how much you could wash them and how much you cooked them, just the idea that it was in a can somehow made me feel safer, right? I haven't bought 12 things of canned vegetables in 5 years, 7 years, but now I have them and we'll eat them. And it's no longer, I'd rather have fresh green beans. I know I've got green beans in the pantry that are in a can. It'll stay a long time if anything does get worse. And I'm not necessarily looking for the healthiest or the best taste. I'm looking for sustenance, right? So I think your threshold changes a little bit too.
Well, and when you really think about carry out, I mean, there have been a couple people who have pointed out that a lot of you have kitchens full of people still making this food. People who need to go into work because they need a living wage. I mean, we all need to go into work and get paid. And unfortunately, a lot of people are finding themselves in unemployment right now. I mean, even my backup job is no longer available because they were closed down due to state regulation. And so it's, you know, you have people who need to make a living, and then you've got people going into kitchens and making this food, and they may or may not know whether they are a carrier, and yet they're in there. And I'm sure that restaurants have upped their level of hygiene practices even further beyond what is normal for them. But you really never know who's making your food, who's touched what, if it's touched other things that could have been infected. And so even carry out is a little bit scary in my mind. I would almost rather cook my own food, even though my cooking abilities are like 0 to nothing. I mean, I would probably be eating a can of vegetables just straight, because I don't have an interest in cooking. I never have. But it might be the time that I start looking up some recipes, because I would rather
Well,
cook
I guarantee
my own
you eat
food.
a couple of just straight cans of green beans, and you're going to learn different ways to cook them so that they taste better.
Exactly. But, you know, and I think the phrase that I keep reminding myself throughout this entire thing is that crises call for creativity, and everyone is having to get a little bit creative with the way that they're living their life, how they're handling social isolation. I keep saying isolation, and I don't really know why, but how they're handling social isolation, how they're managing to get their everyday needs met, income, people are starting to get creative with that. So, you know, every crisis requires a little bit of creativity and definitely adaptability. But I do want to talk briefly about how we can be there for each other, because one of the things that's truly been weighing on me is the fact that, you know, there are people very insensitive to what other people around them are going through. But also, you know, how we can help lift each other up in this time. And one of the ways that I'm personally doing that is practicing additional patience when it comes to customer service issues. And, you know, last week we talked about service in the service industry, but there is that part of me that was very frustrated by the fact that my grandfather reached out to me wanting to set up prescription delivery, but CVS told him that he has to download a mobile app and set it up on his phone, or that he has to set up an account online. So the elderly population that they are trying to support with this prescription delivery is unable to take advantage of the service because they don't have the technological skill to be able to set this up. And CVS can't do anything in store or over the phone to help you set up delivery. And so the woman on the other end of the line at CVS literally told me, well, I'm recommending to all of our older patients that they reach out to their grandkids, which first I'm like, great, thank you for that. Really appreciate it. But second of all, you know, it's not her fault that he got himself locked out of his account. It's not her fault that he's not technologically savvy enough to fix it. It's also not her fault that CVS created a platform that was intended to help an audience that now can't use the platform. So I had to practice a lot of extra patience in spending 2 hours on trying to figure out prescription delivery, because I had to keep reminding myself that she is just as stressed, if not more stressed, far more stressed than I am in this situation. And so I think my own personal way of giving back and trying to help support people is to really practice patience and gratitude for the people who are out there still having to work amongst all of this.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of other different things. I mean, I think it's great. I think you have to thank your server. You know, April posted on Facebook, my daughter that's a waitress, she's like, look, if you're going to eat out, could you at least tip 20%? You know, basically, I mean, it's not time to skimp on tipping. Your server is there and at risk, you know. And I thought that was very valid. You know, somebody else I read, they said, oh, if you get a massage every couple of weeks and you're going to cancel your appointment, well, maybe you go in and you cancel your appointment, but maybe you go in and at least give the tip amount to the masseuse that you usually work with, right? You know, some landlords are waiving rent, and actually one was given half of the security deposit back. for people to have cash flow. I've seen that woman that was online that heard some poor lady yelling from her car window who was too afraid to go into the grocery store because her and her husband were both sickly 80-year-olds, and she gave her $100 on the list and said, could you please buy my groceries for me? You know, so I don't know. I mean, I think there's a part of me, I'm still trying to find equilibrium because, I mean, I had to go to work today, right? So if nothing else, work is getting a little more stressful because we have to show that we're getting things done because there's going to be pressure and who knows if there's going to be layoffs, right? But, you know, I'd like to, I've been toying with the idea of making up some like little card, like paper squares or whatever, and just going and taping them on the front doors around the neighborhood and saying to people, if you're elderly and you can't go to the grocery store, you know, give me a call and I'll run and get, you know, I'll get what you need, or if you need a prescription, right? And a lot of them, I think Kroger is saying they'll deliver for free. Same thing with CVS and the pharmacy, they'll deliver now. So, you know,
What's your reactions to the people who are saying that we should go out and buy gift cards to some of our favorite places to help them sustain their business? Like there's almost this community rallying again around supporting businesses who have to close down. You know, obviously I'm not in the financial situation that I have the means to go out and support businesses that I'm not directly benefiting from right now.
Sure.
I don't think that would be financially wise of me. But what do you think about this community rally behind helping to fund businesces that do have to close?
Well, I think it's great. I mean, I think everybody's trying to find their own path to help, right? I mean, Google's making putting a fund aside for part-time and contract workers who might be impacted. Mark Cuban from the Dallas Mavericks, the owner, he's a billionaire. All the Dallas Mavericks employees, he said, if you go out and you get your lunch or your coffee at a privately owned local establishment, you can file an expense report. So, you know, sorry to the national chains. So if you went to, you know, Mary's coffee shop and you bought a coffee and a bagel, submit it as an expense and he'll reimburse you. If you went to Starbucks, he's not going to reimburse you, right? So, you know, I hadn't heard the gift card thing, but I did hear the thing about tipping, you know, the person that does your nails or whatever, the tip-based community. I think the challenge is with some of that, if they shut things down, these people, it's not like they're going to be sitting in these storefronts twiddling their thumbs. Their storefronts are going to be closed. So you can't even go in and buy the gift card, you know? And so I think the other thing that I'm counting on is this is pervasive enough, much like the guy that went and bought the hand sanitizer and he was kind of marginalized. You know, he's you know, he's learned his lesson. I think the social pressure and the connectivity of everybody being online, I think it's going to cause businesses to do the right thing whenever they can, right? So, you know, we'll just hope. I mean, I think some mortgage companies are saying, or some utilities they're not going to disconnect utilities for the next 2 months. The internet's not going to get this. I read that Zoom is letting school systems and students use its platform for free. You know, so there's a lot of things people are doing to rally around and step up.
Do you think that some of these practices will carry on to the future, even after this is subsided?
I think
what people are realizing is that, you know, the flu kills hundreds of thousands of people a year, and yet we don't put these practices into place. So I mean, granted, we know the symptoms of the flu very clearly. We have vaccines and we have treatment to a certain extent.
And we all have residual immunity, right?
But part of me wonders if some of these practices might be put into place during peak flu season to then try to prevent. I don't know how sensitive we're going to be moving forward.
I think the idea that when the next flu season comes around, and hope to God that coronavirus is not a seasonal thing that shows up next fall. Let's say coronavirus is a one-time thing and it goes away once it's been eradicated, right? And we get a vaccine and we're all good. I think the idea that people say, don't forget, it's flu season, wash your hands, clean surfaces, don't touch your face. I think some of those behaviors will stay. I also think that there'll be an appreciation for, we need a paid sick time policy. We need to understand why was it that we were so close to running out of respirators. Hope to God we don't, right? But if we get close, and what was it in the for-profit healthcare model that caused us to, why was it so hard for us to roll out tests compared to China or other countries with more national medicine programs, right? So I think there's going to be some questions that are going to be asked that are going to maybe pare back some of this toxic capitalism, where it's not, somewhere it shifted from you're in business for your customers and your employees to you're in business for your shareholders. And anything that you did that took away from what you could give back to shareholders was questioned and was called bad business. So the idea of a socially responsible business became an outlier, right? I mean, look at me. I donate 10% of my profits to the Amazon rainforest. And everybody was, yay, good for you. I wish there were more companies like you. It's like, why is that not now the exception, right? We should be saying, what are we doing to support the planet, to support our community, to support our neighbor? I think there's going to be some changes and some shifts. It'll be interesting to see. It's one of those dynamics where people that didn't care, there's people that have these very, very stringent views on things until it affects their family, right? They're anti-gay until they have a child that comes out. They're anti-abortion until their child is pregnant at 15 and may not go to college as a result, right? They're a preacher who goes to, who takes drugs and goes to prostitutes while he's preaching against it, right? So there's a whole element of hypocrisy and that exists, and maybe this will shake out some of that hypocrisy, especially in the generation. But I don't know, because you look at what happened in Nashville. A lot of 20 and 30 somethings were like, this is just people. And there's people on Fox News that are saying stuff like, this is just a whole conspiracy to take down Trump. I don't think the world has not ever rallied and reacted to the same thing at this scale in this short of a time window ever in our history. And that's not deep state. That's not Trump conspiracy. It's just not humanly possible.
One of the conspiracies that this is created by a country somewhere to experiment with mass crowd control and their ability to handle an entire society and get them all inside for whatever reason. But we have deaths. We have countable deaths from this virus that's going around. And my first thought when I hear these things is, even if I am overreacting, even if I am giving in to the panic, let's say this isn't actually this bad, but we are reacting in a way that makes it appear that bad. I am still proud of the choice to socially isolate myself and take the precautions that I have. Even if it turns out that this was all a hoax, and that, I will still be grateful that I took the action that I did, because that means that I care deeply about my community and myself. So
Right.
My message to those who are underreacting is, what does that say about your ability to care for others? Whether or not this is actually to the extreme that it appears to be, which I do think, given current information, it is. And in fact, we may not actually know how bad it truly is until it's too late. Are you willing to sacrifice your cool factor to care for and appreciate the lives of others? And I think that's the underlying question here, is how much do you empathize and care for your community? I think
Right.
that's a great idea of going around and putting, little papers saying if you need help getting groceries or if you need medications picked up. But then, as you say that, the first thing in my mind is like, well, if I volunteer to do that for other people, then I'm putting myself at risk for getting sick, and then I can't see my loved ones. So, there is always that voice inside my head that says I have to put myself first. But also, I am in a position where I am lower risk of fatality than a majority of the population, and I should utilize that to help the community. So there's still this dichotomy of, what decision do I make that's going to be best for everyone? Because if I get sick and then I continue to deliver groceries to people, am I effectively infecting everyone?
Right. Well, and we talk about, my household is 5 people, but we had 2 people over for dinner on Sunday, and then last night we had another person over, and today we have some friends of Lily's that are over. And if you took that group of 12 people that have been through this house in the last 2 to 3 days, we are collectively potentially only as healthy as the least healthy of us at this point. Although I've been telling people to wash their hands, and nobody's coughing, and if I had my way, I'd have everybody taking their temperature and logging it every morning, just because, as soon as somebody spikes, that we all need to get tested, and if there's people that aren't affected, we need to separate them from the people that are, right? When you have a family member that's got this, they're talking about, they need to have their own bedroom and their own bathroom, and their meals need to be dropped at their door, and nobody goes within 6 feet of them until they're done, and if you're a caregiver, if they're not well, you put on a mask and you do your best, so it very quickly goes even to a more isolating area, where even within the households there's stuff going on, not just there's no people on the street, right? I don't know. It's a study in human nature. It's a study in statistics. It's a study in outliers. We just hope there's not a lot of outlier, and the way that you minimize the impact of outliers is the social distancing from those people. But yeah, keep your eye out to see if you hear of a bunch of wrestlers coming down with it, or if Nashville becomes the next biggest hotspot. Yeah. I mean, there was a meme that came out. I don't know where we're at in our time.
Got about 15 minutes left or so.
Yeah. So there's a meme that came out that said, Ireland closed all of their pubs 3 days before St. Patrick's Day. If that is not an indication that there's seriously something going on, I don't know what is. And it's true. I mean, people are setting aside their national identity. I mean, professional sports leagues have shut down. But
for me, it was watching the news, and then all of a sudden they were playing a Fast and Furious movie in place of their sports announcements, and I'm like, what? Never in my life have I seen a local news channel start playing a Fast and Furious movie. I mean, that was like the peak of, oh shit, they've got nothing left to talk about.
Yeah.
But, you know, and in the last, you know, 10 or so minutes that we have left to that point, I'd love to get your input on this whole social isolation thing. One of my favorite memes was both the Charmin bears rolling in cash, but also this one that said, your grandparents were called to war and you're being called to sit on your couch for 2 weeks. You can do this. But social isolation, especially for people who are single and living in their own, that's a really scary thought, because you're alone for 2 weeks. And yes, we have wonderful technology, but as we've discussed on this podcast, there is nothing like a human connection. So, you know, I would love to hear both of your
I'd love to hear what Lily has to say. I think she's dropped off the podcast.
Well, no, 'cause I just
does it seem possible to you? I mean, we've got Netflix, and like, what are the different generational aspects of social isolation?
I don't know. Like I was just listening because I don't really know a whole lot about coronavirus. Like I know about it obviously, but I don't know as much as y'all. So I was just listening to hear about what's going on. But I just
Well, what's your reaction? What's your reaction to some of the things you've heard?
Yeah, like I just
Have we scared you?
No, I mean I'm not necessarily scared. Like I know I'm doing good and I'm not going out as much as I normally would, and I'm kind of just chilling at home, washing my hands, all that. Like I'm not scared of it, but it's definitely, I've never seen anything like it. Like I don't remember the swine flu or like Ebola. Like I never even reacted to those. So like I've never even seen this much panic all at once in my life. And so it's kind of just a little bit shocking for me, but it's not too bad for me right now.
If you ended up having to be quarantined, even from your family in your own house for 2 weeks, does that scare you? What do you think that would look like for you?
A Thursday afternoon.
No, because like I like to isolate myself sometimes and just like recharge like my energy, because sometimes I can't be around people all the time. But for 2 weeks, I feel like I would just be so like sad and just over it, and I can't not be around people for 2 weeks. Like yeah, there's FaceTime and like texting, but I feel like that's not my way of talking to people and like hanging out with people. Like it's not the same over the phone.
I have a different take, right? So let's just look at it. I think there's three grades that I would look at. If you're in complete quarantine and isolation inside the house because you're sick, well, first off, you could get very, very sick, and I hope to God you don't have to go to the hospital, right? So if you're in your bedroom, that means you're doing well, right? So, and if you're even in a position to worry about how isolating and alone you feel, that means you're not feeling like you're gonna die. And I think that's a very real, okay, I'm on the right side of that equation, right? And then when it comes to being in the house and not being able to go out and interact, to go to sporting events and socialize, we're all social animals. I think people struggle when they're alone and they think they're the exception and that there's something wrong with them and that everybody else is out and able to connect, and why can't I? How come I'm here by myself? How come I can't, I don't have enough guts to go out and go to a club, or my friends have invited me and I've said no because I've got social anxiety or whatever. I think when you're isolated as an exception to the norm, I think it can be very, very damaging to your mental health. But if you're in your house as a part of a social isolation or what's the word? Social distancing. I think you feel like you're part of the solution. I think you feel like you're no different than everybody else. Everybody else is dealing with the same dynamic. So just by being in that larger group, I don't feel alone in that regard. So I don't know, that would be the way I would kind of take it from I'm not in the ICU. If I'm bored in my bedroom, then I'm at least feeling better, and I'm just waiting for the clock to finish on my 2 weeks. If I'm in my house like everybody else, well, who am I going to whine to? Who am I going to complain to? I don't know.
I definitely feel like there is that aspect of feeling like you're part of the solution and that you're actively helping. I think for me, this is kind of a blessing of what have I wanted to have time for that I just haven't in my everyday life because I've had so much other stuff going on. And so for me, this is the time to catch up on my writing. It's a time to build that website that I've been putting off. It's a time to redesign my living room. I mean, I'm trying to look at this social isolation as an opportunity to focus on the things that I've been wanting to do, but have put off because I felt an obligation or a desire to be out in the world doing other things. So I think that's really, I'm trying to remind myself that this can be a blessing in disguise.
Well, and people that have been doing Netflix and will be doing Netflix and internet and TikTok, we'll all be so sick of electronics by the time this is all well and done that everybody's going to be going to the park, going out and getting involved. I mean, so maybe this is also something that shakes us loose of this electronic addiction that we've all kind of developed, gradually over time. And you kind of go, okay, wait a minute. Too much of a good thing is too much. To your point, Lily, you've seen the feeds, you kind of checked out because you're just tired of looking at it, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, and that would be my, we're still allowed to go outside. Just don't go out in large crowds and stick yourself inside of a music festival or something. But, especially now that the gyms are closed here in Ohio, I'm certain that on the nice days, we're going to go outside and go for a run or go for a walk because you're going to need to get out of your apartment at some point. And even if it's going to the grocery store to buy one small thing, practicing good hygiene and kind of self-preservation, do that because your psyche will need it. And, reach out to friends and family members who might not talk to other people on a regular basis. I know I'm going to prioritize my grandpa who lives alone in a retirement community that is totally shut down. They're not even opening the dining room for open dining hours. They're taking their stuff to go and going right back to their apartment. And so, prioritize those people who might not have a lot of social interaction. I'm fortunate to live with someone. If we go down, we're going down together. But, I have someone to talk to and be physically close to. But there are a lot of people in this country that don't have that. I almost envision us recreating like a chat roulette or Omegle for coronavirus purposes. It's like we need to talk to people. So certainly, look out for people who haven't had that kind of contact in a while or might not have that kind of contact. And then go outside and take a walk if it's nice because you're still allowed to be outside.
Right.
It's all about being smart and prioritizing and being grounded. But I do think that even though COVID-19 is separating us physically, it is bringing us closer together in so many more ways than one.
We hope so. But, we'll talk again in a week and we'll see what interesting things. I mean, I have a feeling we're going to have a part 2 of this whole discussion.
I have a feeling that might be coming. So be sure to like, comment, and subscribe and share. And check us out on storytellers.xyz. That is our web address. You can actually watch videos of this podcast as well if you have been listening to it on audio. We are on Spotify, Apple, Google, iTunes. I don't know. We're everywhere podcasts can be. And we're on YouTube. So if you want to check out our website at storytellers.xyz, we'd love to connect with you.
All right.
Stay safe out
Thanks,
there.
Erin. Thanks, Lily.
Bye-bye.
Wash your hands.
Absolutely.